Now, China and Costa Rica are seeking to potentially better their bilateral relations as both sides approach their 11th anniversary of diplomatic ties. And this means comprehensive cooperation that goes beyond investment and trade. As being a nation in Central and Latin America, the region has endured sluggish economic growth, setbacks in regional integration, and fluctuating political changes. And these, coupled with a dominant U.S. presence in this region, means Costa Rica has to balance its multilateral relations accordingly. So where are Chinese-Costa Rican ties heading in the present-day climate? What are the nascent sectors that show promise and need pioneering engagement? And how do we build more mutual trust and understanding to resolve challenges and obstacles we meet? Well, to know more about Costa Rica and answer my previous questions, I'm very pleased to be speaking to His Excellency Mr. Alexandre Mora, who is the Minister of Foreign Trade of the Republic of Costa Rica again during his visit in China. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Li Xiuyuan. Your Excellency, thank you so much for taking the time talking to us. Now, I understand last year you were here in China commemorating the 10th anniversary of China-Costa Rica establishing diplomatic ties, and here we are again. You're visiting China at the beginning of this year. Now, we understand there's a very important election going on in your country. A lot of countries, including China, are very keen to know how that election is going to shape up the country's foreign policy, social policy, and economic policies. Do you have any predictions?
Well, it's hard to predict, but we went through a first stage in which we elected 2 out of 13 candidates to presidency, and we also elected the Congress members for the next 4 years. And April the 1st, we have the second round with the 2 candidates that received more votes. So regarding the foreign policy in Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a little bit a living lab. We are a very interesting case to study because we have been able to promote at the same time social progress, economic growth, and protect the environment at the same time. So Costa Rica shows to the world the fact that it's possible to have this balance and to develop a country with that balance. So this is the core of our foreign policy, and it's not going to change because it's a state policy, not a government policy. So we don't expect major changes in the way the country will continue in the future.
Probably we're going to see a continuation. You know, a lot of countries like Costa Rica are going to have their elections this year. Do you see some kind of shifting of the political map in that region?
Well, let's see. Probably Latin America is now a region that has stabilized the democracy. So the electoral process is becoming the rule, the norm. And so we will see shifts because that's usual. But my prediction is that we will see shift in the center spectrum, you know, from central left to center right, but probably not much away from that range.
Mm-hmm. And regional integration has always been a very important topic in that region. How do you evaluate that process going on in Central America?
Well, Central America is the region in the Americas where integration it's a very old process. We started back in the 50s, creating the Central American Integrated Market, and then the Central American States, Community of States. And this is an ongoing process. We are now introducing the 21st century topics into that agenda. We are working in trade facilitation. We're working in developing this supranational digital system that will integrate all the customs and trade procedures across the 6 Latin American, Central American countries. And so we are in a renovation of the agenda of the integration, using the tools of the 21st century and using the logics of the 21st century. So you will see a more integrated Central America in the future, and that will facilitate trade, that will facilitate the participation of the region in global value chains, creating regional value chains, and this is going to be very valuable for Chinese trade and investment policy in the region.
And what is Costa Rica's role in particular in all this?
Well, we are now conducting the process. I am the president of the Central American Council of Integration Ministers. This is a job that we renovate from time to time, so in this case I am responsible for that. So my team in Costa Rica is working with the other Central American teams, trying to create the best conditions to accelerate through this 2018 in order to finish the year with significant advances. In particular, something that is very, very important, the intention to build a customs union across Central America, which means that when you import any kind of merchandise to Central America, you will be only going through one single border. And then you can move your merchandise easily across the 6 countries. So this will create a market of 50 million people, which for the region is interesting, and for traders, like Chinese traders, it's a very interesting way to facilitate and reduce costs.
Oh yeah, and is everybody on board? What about your neighbors? How's Costa Rica interacting with Honduras and Guatemala?
Well, it's moving interesting at different pages. Honduras and Guatemala decided to go faster in some parts of the custom integration. The other countries are having a more technical approach. But I am pretty confident that we will see the harmonization of the process, and that in the coming years, everyone will see a significant change in the way Central America operates as a region.
Now, how do Central American countries look at China's presence there? Is there a consensus? I'm curious.
Well, you know that Costa Rica, 11 years ago, established diplomatic relations. Panama did just last year. And the other 4 countries in Central America still don't have diplomatic relations with China. So I think that Costa Rica and Panama have a responsibility to carry out and promote the benefits of these relations. And our work in doing so, I think, is strategic for the relationship between the region and China. And I think this can probably be extended to the Caribbean as well, because we have a significant influence and a growing presence in the Caribbean. And so the consolidation of a Caribbean basin type of approach, I think, is good for Chinese strategy in the region. We're telling the Chinese government that even the CELAC process is there. The sub-region of Central America and the Caribbean should have like a parallel process, because the CELAC initiative, as we already discussed, has other challenges, and our region probably is ready to go faster in different areas.
You mentioned Panama. It's very interesting. Yeah, China established or resumed its diplomatic ties with Panama just last year, and in that country there's a free finance harbor. Do you see that as a competition? Because a lot of major Chinese banks established there, branch there.
Well, let's see. Costa Rica and Panama are very complementary economies. We don't have the same kind of competitive advantages. Panama is a logistics center, is a financial center. Costa Rica is more an innovation center, is more a country where human talent has gone far, far away in terms of turning Costa Rica the country where we have more engineers as a proportion of the population than in any other country in Latin America. We have been recognized by having the best educational system across Latin America by the World Economic Forum. We have been recognized as the most innovative and the most sophisticated business environment in the whole Latin America. We are leading very, very strategic areas like medical devices, electronics, computer services, corporate services across Latin America. So, you know, if you put together the two set of advantages that the two countries have, so you can have a very well developed dual strategy. And there are companies, business leaders in China that will find very easy to do business with Panama, and from Panama to do business with Costa Rica, and others will find easier to go to Costa Rica, and from Costa Rica address the Panamanian market. So I think that this has to be the way in which this new environment with China and Panama relations in which we have to do our best to operate as a region and to complement each other.
If you look north, look at your northern neighbor, do you feel any uncertainties or pressure from the Trump administration? How do you look at that administration's Latin America policy?
Well, let's see. This is always a challenge because we have expression in our region that says that when the U.S. sneezes, we get pneumonia. Okay, so, and I continue to tell this because I think it's very graphic about what's happening. So, we are small countries. U.S. is our largest trading partner, is our largest investor. Most of the tourism coming to Central America comes from the U.S. So, you know, it's a fact of life, and being in that position has, of course, challenges, but also gives us some advantages. So, for example, our free trade agreement with the U.S. is very flexible. So, Chinese companies working and trying to access the U.S. market in both merchandises or services have a very good platform in Central America to address that market with less challenges and probably less risks than what they have in other areas. So this is a little bit a combination. Politically, of course, there are some issues in which Trump administration is very clear in the direction they wanted to move and the influence they are bringing to the region. And I think that China is been going through a very interesting balancing process where China is very practical. I mean, the pragmatic approach is what should be done in this case. We don't see from the Trump administration, you know, any kind of imposition, any kind of area in which, you know, we are having discrepancies, significant discrepancies. I think that we have narrowed through the time the vision, and we are in good shape, I think, to be able to deal with both China on some areas and the U.S. in other areas and have a complementary strategy, and that's what we're trying to do.
What are some of the issues that Costa Rica and United States are trying to work on to reach a consensus? Can you give us an example?
Let's see. One big issue for us is immigration. Not because Costa Rica has a problem in immigration. Costa Rica is a very unique case because we have more U.S. citizens living in Costa Rica than Costa Ricans living in the U.S. That's a unique situation. And half of the Costa Ricans living in the U.S. are born in the U.S. already. So that is not the situation of the other countries. But the immigration policy will impact the rest of the countries and will impact Costa Rica indirectly. So this has been something that has been brought to the attention of the U.S. authorities, telling them, you know, about the implications and the indirect effects of the immigration policy. That's one side. The other side has to do with trade and investment. We were, you know, there were a number of uncertainties because of the process in which the U.S. administration was conducting the fiscal reform. There were a number of speculations around that, and we didn't know exactly what was going to be the final version of the reform, and it was impacting decisions to reinvest or invest by the first time in Costa Rica and the other countries. So once this was cleaned up late last year, I think that the conditions are much clearer. And because the reform is not including in any way trade barriers, so I think that gave us a good signal. So these are probably the two main areas, in addition to security, which is always on top in the U.S. agenda.
All right, let's now take a short break. You're watching Dialogue. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Your Excellency, before the break we were talking about U.S. traditional influence, on the Latin American region. Do you think that is affecting Costa Rica in any way on its approach to China?
No, I think that Costa Rica has a very clear foreign policy. We have areas in which our relationship with the U.S. is very prominent and very and has a long-term path. Our relationship with China is newest or is newer, and we have still building up in first stages. And my perception is that both U.S. and China are very clear about the influence of the other party and are very pragmatic in the way they are addressing this relationship with third countries. We don't see any kind of pressure on one side or the other side. And I think that because of the geographical location and the geopolitical situation in which Central America is, I think China has a very mature approach and is clear about those conditions. And the U.S. is also very clear about the growing influence and growing participation that China has in the global world. And somehow this has to reach a global balance. And I don't think that the main implications or the trigger for that balance is attached to Central America or to Costa Rica. There are other areas in which China and the U.S. have their main issues. This is not related to our region. So I feel comfortable and confident that this will continue to be the situation.
And trade between China and Costa Rica has been growing, but a lot of people say the cooperation goes beyond trade, but also Chinese investment and also RMB internationalization. How do you look at that kind of saying?
Well, I come from the private sector, and for me, diversification is key in any human activity. So I think that it will be good for the world if we have a diversified environment where we have multiple currencies. And I think the Chinese currency is definitely in the way to become one of the top and referential currencies in the world. So I anticipate that in the future we will be much more in a multi-currency international environment, and that will definitely include the yuan. So my vision here is again very pragmatic. Trade and investment is key. China is becoming gradually the largest trader in the world, has been becoming the largest foreign investor in the world as well. And that gives China the position to reconsider the way in which they do business and they do trade and investment. And I think that we have to be, again, very pragmatic and follow the trends. And that diversification is coming, and it's a matter of time. That's my perception.
Yeah. Let's talk about e-commerce. I mean, e-commerce is huge now in China. It has also boosted a lot of exports from Latin America. Some of the examples: Chilean cherries, wines, Mexico avocados, Ecuador seafood, Brazilian coffee, which is great, and also Costa Rica's pineapple. Do you have any plans on this kind of cooperation?
Let's see. Since 2016, Costa Rica decided to lead a very aggressive process in the framework of the World Trade Organization, the WTO. And we call for a group of countries that is called Friends of E-commerce for Development. So we propose the idea to bring the e-commerce topic into the multilateral agenda. In Buenos Aires in February, in the 11th Ministerial Conference of the WTO, we succeed in making almost 80 countries to sign a ministerial declaration to start in a plurilateral format the negotiation in order to create the right rules for e-commerce. China has not joined the group yet. I hope China will do it soon. And that's one of the reasons why I'm pushing this idea to the Chinese authorities, because China is a very prominent member in the e-commerce field. Now, There are many different rules. For example, you have these trans-border e-commerce rules where virtually there are no rules, which is very unique. And I clearly understand the reason why that is happening that way. But if you look at other countries, e-commerce has rules in those countries. So somehow, in order to give predictability for traders and for investors to go really deep into e-commerce as a driving force, we need to have standardized rules. And that's part of the message we're delivering.
Talk to us more about this rule and no rule difference. What kind of rules do you like to see being put down?
Well, let's see. For example, in China, you have very strict rules to import any kind of, for example, food product. And you have to go through a very long and very strict process that includes inspections to the plants where food is packaged, for example, and produced. But in the e-commerce, in the trans-border e-commerce, those rules do not apply. The rules do not apply. And that means that if you use that channel, then you are exempted from certain rules. But if you go through the traditional channel, then you have other rules that are applied. Now, if this e-commerce less aggressive rules or less complex ruling is what, for example, China is going to maintain in the long term, then it's important for us to know that and to understand that, because that is a good signal for our traders. Okay? If China will gradually put more rules and regulations to that side, then we also need to know what the future will be, because that is a very important message for us to work with our traders to get prepared and avoid surprises in the future. So this is the kind of decisions that have to be made. And at a certain point, I clearly understand what China is doing, because if you don't know an area, if that's completely new, so you leave the room for traders and for the different operators to innovate. And then once you see how they're performing, what they are doing, etc., then you start setting the rules. Probably that's a very pragmatic approach. But of course, we are in the transition, and that transition gives uncertainty, and that uncertainty hurts business. So that's why we're trying, to deliver this message.
A very important message. I'm also curious, are you familiar with some of the Chinese e-commerce giants like Alibaba, Tmall, or JD.com, or do you have any plans to interact with them?
Well, we have in Costa Rica a very interesting approach at public level. I run, under my competency, the Trade Promotion Agency, Procomer, which is a very well-known organization worldwide. Procomer has developed this interface that we call Costa Rica Connect, which is a standardized interface. And this interface allows our traders, our exporters, to connect with Alibaba, with Jumor, and with a number of other e-commerce platforms. So we try to simplify, especially to the small and medium business, all the complexity of that interaction. And we handle at the government level. And it's been very successful. We have a growing number of Costa Rican companies doing e-commerce with multiple platforms. And for example, I had a very interesting meeting with Jumor last time I visited Beijing, because they told me, we are not only a platform for doing business in China. We do business all over the world. So through Jumor, your companies, because it's a B2B company, okay, then you can do business with many other countries in this region or even in Europe. And that message, that power, is something new, I think, for our exporters. And it's something that we're trying to help them to take advantage of.
Let's talk about people-to-people exchange as well. I understand ethnic Chinese in Costa Rica have been living in the country for more than 150 years, if I'm not mistaken. How are they faring in the country?
The China descendant population accounts for almost 2% of Costa Rican population. So it's a significant minority, if you wish, but it's significant. They are spread all over the country. They are very good traders. They are also very deep into the services sector. They own, for example, as usually, retail stores, restaurants, gas stations. A lot of them are owned by Chinese descendant people. And they have been integrated very, very, very deep and well into our society. And we have a great admiration for China's culture. And we clearly understand that China somehow is a country that the modernity push, it's a culture that the modernity push to organize as a country. And that gives us a lot of interesting perspective of how to deal with this process and how to deal with China.
Just one last question. A lot of people here in China are very interested in, traveling to Costa Rica. Is there any plans on simplifying the visa?
We are working on that, and I think it's taking longer than we expected, but it's something that is coming soon. And the reason why we think it's very important for us to attract more Chinese visitors is because, remember, we have 52% of our territory devoted for preservation. So half of the country is just devoted for preservation. We have, last year, we run 344 days consecutively without burning any kind of fossil fuel to generate electricity. Okay, so Costa Rica it's a country where we think Chinese people will find very interesting areas. Educational tourism, cultural tourism, research tourism, and the adventure, which is where we are very well positioned, are areas in which especially young Chinese will really enjoy to be in Costa Rica. So we are working on, and we will see results soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good to talk to you this time. Thank you.
Pleasure. Pleasure.